My fellow Americans,
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, and there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compel. Well, okay, compel. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we're still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans, right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It didn't come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It
no
is
one is
molecularly.
That those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth. You are the one.
Time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result in SARS-CoV-2.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible and human, and you funded it. And you admit the truth. And you implying...
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Redacted, the deep state's least favorite internet program. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we try to connect the dots, leading towards awakening if we can, and covering the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. Hey, we're going to talk about Tucker Carlson back with a new message and a couple of different interviews of sorts, and has a message for the deep state and the corporate media, which, and a lot of people wondering, okay, where is Tucker going to wind up next? I think the message is really interesting, and we're going to talk a lot about the deep state media and the collusion between the federal government, of course, and these big corporate media companies like New York Times and Washington Post and CNN, etc. So we'll talk about that on tonight's show.
Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Reddit, all of them complicit. If you read today's newsletter, when we went over the Twitter files, that also plays into this. The state of Minnesota now is a sanctuary state for transgender children who want to receive surgery and synthetic hormones. And now new legislation seeks for it to also be a safe space for people who would like to prey on young children for sexual acts. We are going to discuss that legislation as well. Let us know if you're for
Minnesota.
or against that.
The land of 10,000 lakes, the land of 10,000 child predators. That's what Minnesota will become. All right, we're also going to talk about the Defense Department and the media, the collusion there. There's a video that's gone viral, and of course, this person standing up and basically asking the New York Times, the Washington Post, like, why are you not covering one of the biggest stories of the last 100 years? Of course, the Nord Stream pipeline bombing by the United States. Why are you complicit in this deep state narrative? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to trafficking with a whistleblower testifying before Congress. With the young World Economic Forum leaders, what does it take to become a member of the World Economic Forum? How does Klaus Schwab sort of groom all of these young leaders? All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. So guys, please get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on your show. Yes, we're working on that. I did text him. We're trying to line that up. So hopefully our schedules will align and we will have RFK Jr. here on the show. That would be great. We'll be able to deep dive that. Tucker took the piss out of like both parties, right? Republicans and Democrats. We are literally led by one party right now, which we'll talk about. So Republican, Democrat, really, it's all one mess right now. So I'd love to talk to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about this two-party system, this alleged two-party system. But hey, we have a newsletter, and it publishes every day.
I'll tell you a little bit about the newsletter. If you go to redacted.inc and put in your email address, you will get an authenticated email, and then you click it. And what you get for that is a free daily newsletter. It consists of about 4 major stories and then a bunch of other little blurbs to topics of interest for people who like geopolitics and maybe some culture. It is meant as a companion piece to this show, so it's written by Clayton and myself. And it is, you happy with that? And it is, what is it? It's fun.
It's fun. You can read it in about 5-10 minutes over your cup of coffee first thing in the morning. And all you need to do is just go to redacted.inc. Don't go to .com. Go to redacted.inc. Put in your email address and you'll receive that welcome email. So we publish that newsletter Monday through Friday. So tomorrow morning you'll get the last newsletter of the week. So again, it's totally free. And it's a way for us to stay connected with you here on the show, be able to converse back and forth when crazy stuff is happening in the world. All right, let's get to it. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the world right now. So Tucker Carlson, our good friend Tucker Carlson, everyone's wondering what in the world was he doing? What is he up to after his sudden and immediate departure from Fox News on Monday? Like, what the heck happened? He was getting ready to prepare for a show, and suddenly a message down from Rupert Murdoch or whatever is, we're done. And so a lot of people speculating as to what exactly happened. Well, Tucker came out and he didn't address specifically what happened, but did have a message. We can kind of like play it and talk a little bit about what this sort of corporate media message is. Mm-hmm. See if you can pick up some of the veiled commentary about corporate media, corporate press.
Okay, but if we're playing like Tucker Carlson bingo, Like, what are the reasons in which he left? You know, I've sort of been a little bit consumed by it in the last couple of days.
Well, he's such a close friend, too. It's like it's...
Yes, because we know him, they're family friends. Also because, as Russell Brand pointed out, the media is kind of obsessed with itself. So it's been so incestuous that you can't, as soon as you like dip a toe into it, it feels like a black hole. You're sucked right in. But if we have this sort of like bingo card of hypotheses, it would be the Dominion lawsuit. It would be transgenderism. You know, these are the things that people
Ukraine
are saying
war.
as reasons.
Right.
You know, calling out the CIA, the FBI, Julian Assange.
January
all of these
6th.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things on the bingo card. But my biggest hypothesis was that it was because he was anti-war. And that this was history repeating itself around the time when Phil Donahue was taken off the air as the marquee personality of another network.
Well,
so I just would like you to know, when we play this, what's the thing he mentions first? Is it something that I can say I told you so about?
All right,
I'm
let's
just gonna put it out there.
Let's roll it.
Good evening, it's Tucker Carlson. One of the first things you realize when you step outside the noise for a few days is how many genuinely nice people there are in this country. Kind and decent people, people who really care about what's true, and a bunch of hilarious people also, a lot of those. It's got to be the majority of the population, even now. So that's heartening. The other thing you notice when you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated. And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources. When was the last time you heard a legitimate debate about any of those issues? It's been a long time. Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state. That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last. They're brain dead. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them. This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink, and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope. See you soon.
So a lot of people speculating, see you soon. So what will that mean exactly? We don't know. I'm sure he's taking some time, enjoying some downtime. But let's just unpack what he said there, right? I mean,
the first thing he lists is war. Some of the things that people are afraid of you having legitimate conversations about. He does say war. Now, I mean, is that enough for me to take a victory lap? No. But he mentions a bunch of different things and talks about how people are afraid of hearing them. So who is afraid of hearing them?
Well, the Pentagon. So the Politico released an article yesterday. I love, Politico, which of course is just a mouthpiece of the military-industrial complex and the intelligence state. Politico releases an article yesterday saying that the top brass at the Pentagon are pleased. The top brass at the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, are happy that Tucker was pushed out at Fox. Of course they are. To which Tucker responded, because Politico wanted a comment, and Tucker just responded via text to one of the Politico reporters and just said, "Ha, I bet." Exactly. So, of course he is, because he was very critical of Mark Milley. He's been very critical of how the military has been moving towards, is becoming ideological rather than an actual fighting force.
Yes. He's willing to say that Zelensky is trolling America for money. And, that's, an unpopular opinion.
He's also been very critical, even going back to my time sitting on the couch with him and co-anchor. When he went to Iraq and he saw the horrors of seeing what happened to the soldiers and women specifically who were fighting in Iraq, he's like, no, moms, women should not be fighting on the front lines of these wars that these men are creating. It should not happen. It's disgusting, and it shows a military in decline. And you can say what you want about women fighting in wars and all that. If you agree with it, great. But his point was, no, we should not be doing that. If men are creating this, men should fight it. And all these women who were coming home maimed and just loss of limbs and just awful. So he's been very critical. He's been very critical of the wars. He's been very critical of these proxy wars. He's been very critical of why the hell are we spending $115 billion in Ukraine when our cities are on fire in the United States, when our borders are porous, when we can't, when our education system is crumbling, when we have poverty increasing, a no middle class at all. Why the hell are we spending this much on foreign wars? So of course the Pentagon is happy that he's not there anymore.
But who else can we read between the lines that is afraid to hear his narrative? Well, Fox News.
Right.
Which, we had sort of not been sure if it was someone inside of upper management or if, how far did that go? Was there a message they wanted to just
silence.
Switch off?
Right.
He doesn't say as much, but him saying that powerful people are afraid, and then we know someone outside of him made this decision. Well, we can extrapolate.
We also can extrapolate too. Again, he's not being critical or saying anything negative about Fox, right? So clearly there was some sort of a mutual agreement of goodbye.
I think that's the opposite of what I just said.
Well, was he really critical of Fox? I mean, he was critical of corporate media. I mean, and so you could then extrapolate,
that there are powers. His employment was with Fox News, and it was taken from him.
Yeah.
And he's saying that there are powers that are afraid of him speaking. So it has to have been Fox. Yes, I'm sure he can't say anything. I'm sure that, the way these things work in media contracts, he most likely has a non-disparage clause and can't say anything.
And he's not and he's not usually that kind of person.
He wouldn't anyway. Yeah. He's not going full Don Lemon and let's, sue the network.
Full Don Lemon.
That's now a thing.
So the Daily Mail, though, sent a reporter to Florida to his house to try to get him on camera and get him to say a few words. And he did. And he was gracious about it. So they kind of accosted him and had the cameras and filmed him leaving his house with his wife on their way to a dinner date on their golf cart. Because everyone in Florida drives golf carts, they don't really drive cars. All of my friends, it's true. All of my friends that live in Florida, they all live in communities where there's a gate or something where you can't drive out of it, and they all just drive golf carts. They all just go down to the pool and on a golf cart.
Okay,
that's the way they do it. Anyway, here's Tucker. It's a little quick clip. Watch. He's just laughing at the reporter standing there taking photos of him. He's just, anyway, there he goes. Okay. He's just laughing. And here's a
with this quintessential known chuckle.
Yeah. He's like, why are you, they're filming me? Okay. So he sort of shrugged off the media firestorm when he was sort of asked about this by the Daily Mail. And he said, I'm going out, for a date with my wife. And he said, look, retirement is going great so far, he said. And he says, I haven't eaten dinner with my wife on a weeknight in 7 years because he has to do the show. So he doesn't get to have dinner with his wife and kids, and he's busy up and, it's showtime at 8 o'clock. So you're cramming with your producers and all of that. And he said, yeah, now I get appetizers plus the entree. But here's my favorite take on this whole thing today. I think this sums it up. If you want to hear from the deep state on this, someone who worked in the deep state, who left the deep state, who understands completely. An ex-U.S. Army PSYOPs expert says that Fox News fired Carlson to maintain a, quote, semi-lobotomized, quasi-retarded population.
What the heck?
And so what he said was, this is Bennett. This is former U.S. PSYOPs officer. Who his name is Scott Bennett. He said that Tucker, quote, needed to be silenced because he represented too big a threat to the powers and principalities, institutions, and agendas that seek an unenlightened, uninformed, semi-lobotomized, quasi-retarded population that do not question, do not research, do not analyze, but simply digest and follow instructions. He says Tucker Carlson exposed the fraud and money laundering, racketeering crimes of FTX and the Democrat Party in Ukraine involving the United States government. He exposed the U.S. biochemical labs in Ukraine and their connection to the Democratic Party. President Barack Obama, Biden, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, Bill Gates, and other U.S. government agencies and pharmaceutical companies, Scott Bennett told Sputnik News. But I love that Fox News fired Carlson to maintain a semi-lobotomized, quasi-retarded population. Unpack that a little bit. Think about that. What he's saying is that now that you took the rabble-rouser out of Fox, like anyone who's like flipping on Fox or flipping on MSNBC or CNN is getting basically garbage.
Yes.
Basically.
Who's left there? I mean, not that I watch a lot of Fox, but who is left there to speak for Julian Assange or to call bullshit on the Duma investigation in Syria?
No.
Who's there to look into biolabs in Sudan?
No one.
And the NIH influence there?
No one.
Yeah, he would do those things and everyone around him would act like they had blinders on. Like, that's nice. Now back to our regularly scheduled.
Oh, this 1 hour of news where he's actually covering something legitimate, like the Nord Stream bombing, right?
Yeah.
The Nord Stream pipeline, which basically most of the other, none of them really covered it in detail. Actually giving a platform to Seymour Hersh and covering that story. Nobody else. So you get that 1 hour of like sanity from like 8 to 9, and then you go back to the lobotomized, quasi-retarded population.
And then look, the piece he did, let's say with Russell Brand, where they call out the fact that, the left and the right media are the same. They're just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And so people who start to pull that thread, yes, wake up. And, I go back to the fact that in journalism school, you're taught to write to an 8th grade education. You're taught to write and broadcast, nothing above an 8th grade education. And most journalists kind of take that seriously and don't bother to reach any higher. Who does that help? Is that helping anyone get smarter and more educated? Is this like fulfilling the public good of journalism as an ombudsman? I think most of us, like I used to have this colleague who would joke when we would like, what about this? What about this? And the joke was too smart for TV. Like, nope, that's too smart for TV.
And so Tucker would tell me, he's like, he would think all day about like writing his opening monologue, his opening story, and he would really like give it a lot of thought. He'd like sit quietly and like really, he's a writer by trade, so he would think and really like go through like putting this narrative together at the beginning of his show. And like you could always sort of count on that top part of his show to be thoughtful, educated, maybe funny, a little funny as well, but also well-informed and something you weren't going to see anywhere else. I love someone in the chat just said, I've now clicked the do not recommend button for Fox on YouTube. Now I just don't do it. And it's true. Like, you go from like Tucker's show then to a warmonger right after that. You go to these other shows afterwards who are literally the polar opposite, who are like pushing for war in Ukraine, pushing for confrontation with Russia, putting on people on the air like Lindsey Graham and these buffoons, and just they're part of the corporate. They're part of the corporate problem.
Yeah.
Really. So anyway, it's been amazing to watch.
Right. And it's been interesting to watch people sort of like just plant their flags around identity politics with Tucker as a platform, as if it's like trans rights, gay rights, environmental rights, all of this stuff. And like where I stand on Tucker Carlson is immutable because maybe you didn't like the way he characterized immigration, or maybe you didn't like the way, I don't know, he presents certain transgender issues, in which case people are unable to see what goes missing with this one voice that maybe there's certain parts of it that you don't like. As if what that says to me is that like I can meld myself into any other cable news anchor that's unoffensive to me, right?
Right.
And I won't expect to be pushed or uncomfortable. And everyone else will just like, it will be a reflection of myself. It's almost like this sort of narcissistic cycle of like not being pushed in your paradigms in life.
Well, and that's what,
and it's I was gonna say it's so important too, because I mean if you go back to like the because I grew up with like the news anchors of the 80s where you'd get like this really like they wouldn't do investigative journalism, they would go after people, they would actually do their job. Yeah. And where you look at like the media now, it's like whether you agree with Tucker or not, losing voices of dissent against what the government does is so detrimental to us as a society because once all those voices are gone, they can do whatever they want and they have no gatekeepers. Nobody is keeping an eye on it. Yeah. And so then it's left to like independent media to take that on and try as we might. We don't have the broadcast capability that they do. It's like we don't have that brand recognition yet. You know what I mean? Yeah. So independent media is at a disadvantage in that. And so it is a serious win for sort of like that deep state to get rid of dissenting voices. Yeah. And so now, like you had said, who's left? Who's left to take on the military-industrial complex?
No one. They're not going to. And so, I mean, maybe someone will surprise us, but it would be suddenly like an about face. Right. Like suddenly, I mean, I'm not going to name any names because I don't watch anybody else. I don't watch anyone else, and there's no reason for me to watch anybody on that channel. Like the only person I would watch on that network was Tucker. Truth, and so because I don't know who else is going to take that on. It's not. No one else is going to take that on.
Yeah.
And if they do, it's going to be a fake. It's going to be like, wow, this person suddenly, I should say occasionally like Maria Bartiromo would do a really good job of like taking on topics that, wow, I can't believe, and so there's times when we've definitely featured Maria Bartiromo here on the show occasionally for different things. But,
yeah, way back in the day, I thought Jake Tapper would be like one of those voices, and that didn't last very long at all. So CNN's not going to step up, and because not even just Fox, like who anywhere on mainstream media is now voicing dissent.
Yeah, no one. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. We're going to talk about Minnesota. Minnesota in just a moment I'm going to take a poll here. Should Minnesota be kicked out of the United States of America?
What are you saying?
Should Minnesota literally be like kicked out? Be like, okay, we'll go back to 49 states because of what Minnesota is about to do in their legislature, like is just jaw-dropping. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about this whistleblower coming forward saying the federal government has been complicit in trafficking of human beings.
Would that make the United States a pimp? Remember we talked about this word before?
Yeah, I think the United States then is a pimp, and we're going to hear from this whistleblower and break that down. It's unbelievable. We got a lot of news to get to here on your Thursday. But first, well, the United States just released new economic data showing lower than expected inflation numbers. As a result, U.S. stock futures rose sharply. U.S. bond yields fell as market expectations for continued tightening by the Federal Reserve have now cooled off. And the Fed futures markets are looking at interest rate cuts coming this summer. That could be good for the housing market, but it could be bad, of course, for a broader recession. So the Fed is getting us ready for a recession. But the stock market doesn't seem to mind. The Dow futures, the NASDAQ futures jumped on this news, but at the same time, gold is nearing an all-time high. So all of these things are hard to keep track of. And that's why I often use the Moomoo app or the Moomoo app on my Mac for great economic information, because Moomoo offers 24/7 global financial news to help you stay on top of the market trends, grab the changes quickly. So I see these every morning when I go over my portfolio. Right there, I can read the Fed policy. I can see the related reports immediately right inside the Moomoo app. Also, they have a Moomoo community with over 19 million people from 200 countries sharing their investment experience, which is really interesting to read. Right now, you can get up to 15 free stocks just for opening an account with Moomoo and making your initial deposit. Moomoo is a safe and reliable platform. The overseas version, called Futsu, has been listed on NASDAQ in the United States for a long time. With 19 million registered users, Moomoo can also trade U.S. stocks, Hong Kong stocks, and Australian stocks. And speaking of Australia, guess what? We're talking about international trading. If you're an Australian viewer right now, our Australian viewers get 10 free stocks valued up to 3,100 Australian dollars. If you deposit any amount, you get up to 3 free stocks. And then if you deposit 2,000 Australian dollars, you get an extra 7 free stocks. It's one of my favorite trading apps where I set my alerts about my commodity stocks that I like to trade. They also have earnings seasons calendars built right in, so you can see these different companies' earnings and a ton of related research reports. They're useful, especially when you decide to start investing in a company. Besides, if you want to learn how to invest, there are more than 2,000 free investing courses on the Moomoo platform. You can customize your study plans as well. And the app also offers more investment insights like institution tracking. You can see what famous financial institutions are investing in. You want to follow a big hedge fund? You can do that right inside the app. Try it today and get 15 free stocks when you download the app and make your initial deposits. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo. Again, redacted.inc/Moomoo. Try it today. And if you subscribe to the channel tonight, yes, we're still working on our backboard here, but it's coming together. So if you... There, we just got a new subscriber.
Lucid Moments of Reality 5150.
I love that name. That's the screen name. Lucid Moments of Reality just became a redacted rebel. So welcome to the rebellion.
I have those from time to time, just occasionally.
Lucid Moments of Reality. Just if they're fleeting.
I'm only quasi lucid most of the time.
Mostly my thoughts are like Dom Looper here, DM Looper, Dumb Looper, DM Looper. Welcome to the rebellion. All right, let's talk about Minnesota.
All right. Well, the state of Minnesota may soon become a safe haven for child predators if Representative Lee Fink passes Bill HF 1655. Here's Lee Fink. This is Minnesota representative, a transgender person who was elected last year after running on a platform of legalizing medical transition for minors. Fink, interestingly enough, is very interested in minors. In fact, Fink wrote this book for children called Queerfully and Wonderfully Made, a guide for LGBTQ plus Christian teens.
Wow.
In this book, Fink has advice for young people such as this: trans and non-binary and queer and gay and lesbian and bi young people, don't listen to your parents. That's the sage advice from this Christian trans
So don't listen to your parents
person.
at all. Yeah.
That's the quote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Now, Fink is a parent, though, who calls themselves a single mom of 2 elementary school daughters, even though Fink did not transition until 2017. So presumably was the girl's father for at least some part of their lives, but still now is billed as a single mother. Fink was also named as one of USA Today's Women of the Year, alongside Michelle Obama and Goldie Hawn and NASA astronaut Nicole Mann.
You mean other biological women?
Yes. USA Today says that women on this list make a positive impact in their communities every day. So how is Lee Fink making positive impacts on the community that they serve in Minnesota? Well, earlier in this week, Fink successfully passed the Trans Refuge Bill. That's HF 146. It allows minors from other states to come to Minnesota to receive gender-affirming care, meaning surgery and pharmaceuticals, and it prevents other states and parents from outside of Minnesota to get their children back. Here is the headline of the bill. It says it prevents the use of subpoenas to gather information for out-of-state laws interfering with the use of gender-affirming health care. It prevents, child custody and child welfare provisions from out-of-state. You can't use warrants, arrests, or extradition to other states. So once a child hits Minnesota state land, they cannot be removed if they are now on any kind of cross-sex medicalization.
So let's just play this out. Let's role play this a second. Okay. Let's say we live in Pennsylvania. Okay. And our 12-year-old son is going through some mental issues, and decides that, in the dark of night, has been on TikTok and has been seeing some stuff about going to Minnesota would be a safe haven. And he's going to go there and get drugs and hormone
and get his balls
puberty
removed.
Yeah,
he
his
can
testicles.
do that now.
And we can't do anything about it as parents.
No, you can't get him back. You can't subpoena anybody. You can't
the hell
extradite
is happening?
him. No, absolutely you can't.
What the hell is happening?
Now, Fink was given. So okay, that passed. That was introduced just a few months ago and passed and became law April 24th.
So Minnesota, let's just be clear.
Minnesota is now a sanctuary state like California. So if you're going to put this poll up and say, you know, should Minnesota be its own country and maybe not be a part of the United States, you're going to have to toss out California too, because I think California and I think Oregon also is a sanctuary state. Is it? Philip lives in Oregon. Do you know?
Well, it's a sanctuary state for immigration, but not
for medicalization.
Not that I know of.
It's only a matter of time. If Oregon's not on the list, that'd be a shock. But yeah, so Minnesota legislature, they got together, all of the people in the legislature, like, yeah, that sounds like a great plan.
Yeah, let's screw every other parent in every other state from making choices about their kids.
And I would love to know how many of those legislators in Minnesota are paid or have gotten funding in some capacity from the drug manufacturers that make these puberty blocking drugs and other things like that, who are pushing this stuff.
I went down a rabbit hole today from a talk by Jennifer Bielek. If you don't follow Jennifer Bielek, please do. She is the only person who is following the money in America for the medicalization of the human body. And boy, she can take you really far down this rabbit hole. For instance, she says, why is this the only dysphoria that we validate with surgery and drugs? Because it's really the only one that we can make money from. There are other dysphorias, such as people who have limb dysphoria, who they feel like, this is not my arm, I should not be living with this arm. And we don't say like, great, let's cut it off. Anorexia is a dysphoria that we do not validate. We help people overcome it and live in the bodies they were given. Why we want to medicalize the body to a certain extent. There are people who have laid this out and are making a ton of money on it. For instance, if you give someone Lupron who has cancer.
What is Lupron?
Lupron is a puberty blocker. I think what you charge their insurance is like $4,000, which is a lot, but it's nothing compared to what you charge if you give it to a transgender child to treat dysphoria, to stop their normally coursed puberty. It's like $9,000. That's what insurance.
So
pays
again,
for that.
these I would love to know, these Minnesota legislators. If you guys live in Minnesota, start looking into this. Who in the legislators making money, getting money from these big pharmaceutical companies?
I do hope to have Jennifer Bielek on here because she can lay this out so much better than me, because she's been pulling the thread of where the money goes. She goes, if you want to understand anything in America, you follow the money, and it's a clear path. Where this came from, why it's become so popular, and who is benefiting from it. It comes from, I want to say, a generation above us, but it's aiming for a generation below us, if you're in my generation.
Someone in the chat, Togar, says in the chat that it's about $1.3 million per trans person.
Yes. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. So maybe you are following Jennifer Bielek. Anyhow, let's get back to
Minnesota.
The next step in Minnesota. So now already Minnesota is a sanctuary state. Now, Lee Fink, the person we spoke about, was given the chance to edit Bill HF 1655. This bill seeks to add gender identity as a protected class, and it defines gender identity as a sense of being. May be different from your biology, but it is whatever your sense is, okay? So if you sense yourself a woman, you're a woman. That's what she wants to codify into law. It also seeks to add sexual orientation as a protected class, but then look at the edits that Fink suggested to that category. So here's how it stood as it was drafted, that sexual orientation, again, should be protected. It means having or being perceived as having an emotional, physical, or sexual attachment to another person without regard of the sex of that person, or having or being perceived as having an orientation for such attachment. Now, this is what they are proposing to delete, or having or being perceived as having a self-image or identity not traditionally associated with one's biological maleness or femaleness. Now, obviously, those words are problematic, so you would see why a transgender person might delete that part. But why this part? Sexual orientation does not include a physical or sexual attachment to a children by an adult. So by removing that, you are saying that people who are sexually attracted to children, that is a sexual orientation which means that is a protected class.
In other words, PD, those types of people, PDs, they are now a protected class in Minnesota. So
Well, this has not been voted into law. This is a proposal.
This is a proposal. The other one they already have, right?
Yes.
So this is a proposal. And so the only way we stop this is if we call attention to it and we call legislators in Minnesota and tell them to absolutely do not make child predators a protected sexuality, a protected class, right?
Right, because if child predators are not excluded from the sexual orientation protection, then they would be included. You could very well perceive. And if they are included, how is it illegal to do it? Like if you arrest somebody for, say, attacking your child or abusing your child, well, then you can't do that because they are exercising their right as a protected class. You could make that argument.
You could say that it's discrimination. So like, let's say there's like some creepy 30-year-old, I don't know, guy, and he's hanging out at a park and he picks up like a 12-year-old. And under this law, that person would be a protected class.
Or let me just be a little creepier than that.
Okay. I'll let you do that.
There.
Normally, I'm the one.
Let's say your child's teacher is, doing things that you're uncomfortable with and saying things that are sexualizing the children and maybe like rubbing their shoulders in a way that you don't like. And you complain to the school and they could say, yes, but they are a minor attracted person, and that is their gender identity, so you cannot discriminate against them. So then do you have the right to not have your child, like, if your child said, Mr. McCartney was rubbing my back, during story time, do you have that right to say no? I don't know where I came up with that.
Mr. McCartney.
I saw sorry, we have Beatles.
Well, but if this falls into the,
Paul McCartney is not a child predator.
He is not. We have these coasters that are from the Beatles. I'm sorry, Paul McCartney. Please go ahead.
So no, but as a part of this bill, though, does that mean that, like, so let's say that they do strike that out, it still passes, then like if a child is taken across state lines into Minnesota, are they now like a permanent Minnesota resident under the protection of what the person that brought them there, and the parents have no right to get them back? I mean, like this is.
That's another.
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, so someone abducts somebody, and there's an Amber Alert or something like in Florida, and this person like hightails it to get to Minnesota, and now they're like protected because they're in Minnesota. I mean, who knows if it comes down to residency or not? I don't know. That's a great question. But these are the sort of loophole. These are the sort of questions that smart legislators should be asking, right? Like, what the hell?
Yeah, they should be looking at this.
Right.
You'd think you'd be like, why'd you scratch this, Lee Fink?
Yeah, considering like somebody obviously thought this through enough to that when they first proposed it and they voted on it, they're like, but we want to make sure it's clearly not child predators.
Right.
Yeah.
Any PDs out
protected.
there. Any PDs out there or child predators, like we want to make sure that they are a protected class because.
And Lee Fink is like, wait a minute, how come where's all the fun in that?
Yeah, like
erase.
They're like, what's so bad about a 30-year-old dude being attracted to a 12-year-old girl? Like, come on, like that should be a protected class. That's literally what they're saying with this.
Now, as it stands in Minnesota, sexual acts with someone under the age of 16 is illegal. Under there are some exceptions. For instance, if like a 13-year-old has sex with a 15-year-old, they don't get arrested if they're within 3 years of age of one another. So like, teenagers, that's a different thing.
The Romeo and Juliet laws, they typically call that.
This makes me uncomfortable to talk about. I'm just giving you that distinction. Now, as a parent, of course, this legislation freaks me out because I feel like our generation of parents is supposed to be the ones that like listen to our kids and listen for the signs and make sure that they feel comfortable telling us what's going on and make it a safer world so less child predators, fewer child predators can actually get at their game. Instead, it seems like we're creating a world where it can happen to them more. We have spoken out a lot about how the LGBT community had its sort of movement, hijacked and tagged onto by the trans rights activists, and now LGB members are pushing back. But we've been warning you that that is an expanding, spectrum of interest groups that want to sort of tack on to the civil rights, the hard-won civil rights of gay people now are being tacked on to people who, by groups that do not at all represent gay rights. And a friend of mine, I was talking to her today, and she's like, I've been an out lesbian for 40 years. We've tried so hard to make it so that people don't see us as perverts. And then now people see this as like all part of the same ball of wax. And this doesn't represent us at all. And she just goes bananas over it. Now there's a movement online to rebrand these child predators as MAPs, or minor attracted persons, or YAPs, which is youth attracted persons. And you know how the gay rights movement had the rainbow flag, and then now the trans rights activist has this sort of baby shower color flags, where it's like powder blue or baby pink. Well, now online there is a MAP or YAP flag to represent people who are minor attracted. This was put online this week and then immediately suspended by Elon Musk. And the person said, this is for Alice Day. Here is Elon Musk responding to someone saying, look, Elon Musk suspended this flag, and he says, absolutely, this is not tolerated on this platform. So I'm letting you know, if you see this flag, you should report it. Don't report this. Right. We're just showing it. This is a symbol of predators. Let me tell you a little bit about, let's take it down.
Yeah.
What Alice Day is, because that was just this week, April 25th. And that is a day when child predators just sort of show around this teddy bear. I'm just going to show you this local news clip. There's no audio to it. When you see this, also, that is a sign for predators that they are going to share tips and tricks being the marginal, or
what, the bear?
That bear is a sign of,
because Peter Frowine in our chat says, Clayton, please stop using the word Petey. It's way too close to my name. I'm sorry, Peter. I'm trying to
like that IT crowd where her boyfriend was Peter File.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Literally, if you do a search for that word on YouTube, you won't find it. Like, it's blocked, banned. You can't use it. So we've been very careful to not use it because they'll block our whole show. So what's another word we can use that, what word we're talking about? Panda? How about pandas?
We're not coming up with any kind of cute name for sexual predators of children.
Okay, we'll just call them child predators. That's what we've been calling them all the time. All right, so I won't call them Petey anymore.
What are you trying to do? Make a game out of it?
Not a game. I'm just trying to find something that we all know, we understand what it is, and it's awful. But we can still cover this story and not be blocked and banned.
Okay, well, I haven't said that word.
Okay.
I've only said child predators. Okay. I don't want to be cute about this. It's not funny.
Who's being cute about it?
It's terrifying.
Yeah, I know. That's my point. The stories are being suppressed is my point. So in order for us to get this information out there, we have to delicately dance this crap. That's what I'm pissed about.
So you see, the chat room goes crazy when we argue like this. We'll stop bickering now in front of you. I always tell the kids, don't fight in front of other people. It makes them uncomfortable. But I do that with you every night.
I know. Like, what the hell? You use your own advice?
I showed you the bear. That also is a symbol of a predator. Report it when you see it. But my point here is that we will inevitably see that MAPs and YAPs are presented as marginalized groups, and that this will become louder in the same vein as we are asked to see transgender people as a marginalized group. Because, again, we have allowed trans rights activists to put their sort of fetishes on children as an identity. Like they are now advocating for this. Not all of them. And of course, Philip was talking about earlier, there is this division of people who are like, you don't belong in our group, or you can't go this extreme. But look at this tweet calling for people who, that P word, this person is saying, no, we have to put these people in prison or get them extensive treatment. And this other person says, you're inciting violence towards a marginalized group. So again, this is the rhetoric that we are going to see, is calling minor attracted people
a marginalized
and we talked about this when we talked about some of the board members of Mermaids, the transgender advocacy group in the UK, that one of their board members was someone who advocated for yaps and maps. I'm not a therapist. I don't know what a child predator needs. What I do know is they do not need legalization.
Well, you don't know what they need to get better. You left that part out. You don't know what they need to get better or improve.
Ew.
You wrote it here. I don't know what a child predator needs to get better.
Okay, but I wouldn't be thinking what they need to satisfy themselves. I'm thinking what they need to be a part of society.
That's what I'm saying.
Clearly, I don't think anyone was thinking I was hoping to get them what they want. What the hell, Clayton?
Go on. I'm saying you left that part out, which means to improve through therapy. If they're going to improve, that's the part you left out. I was just calling attention to that.
You're on my list right now. Okay. Yes. Minor attracted people are not a marginalized group. Children, the young people, the minors are the marginalized group. Let's protect them first. And I'll deal with you later.
I hope so. Yes. A lot of people in the chat agree with me, which is great. As usual. I don't know. I'm just saying these people are not marginalized. It's disgusting is what it is. Monsters.
And to be very clear, like the vast majority of the LGBT communities does not accept maps as part of their group. The people that do are the maps. They are the ones that are fighting for legitimacy, and nobody else is fighting for them.
Yeah,
exactly. Nobody else is fighting for them.
Creating a flag. We're normal. We're just like the LGBTQ plus community. We're maps. That's our orientation. We just happen to be really attracted to young people.
I don't think it has anything to do with LGBT community.
No, absolutely it doesn't. But they're trying to. They're trying to lump themselves into it in order to get favored nation status.
Yes.
So it's really disturbing.
I mean, it's a sign of how well the gay rights movement has been able to establish rights for itself, which is wonderful. But it does feel like it's being dragged back down and regressed to a place where the people that this movement was for, homosexuals, now are being marginalized as bigots.
Yeah.
Because they do not want to accept these other groups. And it's not like they're just pulling up the drawbridge, we got our rights, bye. I mean, they're literally not a part of the same ideology at all.
Not at all. It's really, really sad. And it's so much more nuanced. And I'm glad we're able to have this discussion on the show and go into this nuance here. So let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Should Minnesota be kicked out of the United States? That's my question, if it moves forward with this legislation. Okay, we've got more news to get to. We're going to look at this viral video. This is unbelievable. You're going to want to watch this in just a second. It's perhaps my favorite video of this year so far. And this young man takes on the New York Times, takes on the Washington Post, slams mainstream media for not covering the big stories of the day. And then, this is the tolerant left. He gets slammed to the floor for asking these questions. We're going to have a discussion about that. You're going to want to watch this video in a second. And turns out President Biden likes to get some cheat sheets from reporters before he takes questions. You got to submit your questions to President Biden ahead of time. So we'll talk about all of that and more. But first,
I want to tell you about our friends over at Aura. Now, anyone can find anything on the internet, including your full legal name, your personal email, your home address, phone numbers, even your relatives. Now, after researching the story that we just did about predators online, this is something that I am super keen on, is making sure that you are protected. And then also, if someone searches for you, what do they find out about your children? Well, this information is accessible because of data brokers who profit by selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, and anyone else that wants to learn about you. That's why we want to tell you about Aura. Aura will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They'll even opt out of junk mail and telemarketing lists, so you can use our link at aura.com/redacted to try it for 2 weeks for free and see how many data brokers are sharing your information, you and your family and your loved ones, again, because you never know who is associated with you and who you would be protecting if you protected yourself as well. So there is a QR code that you can see at the bottom of your screen, or if you're not looking at this very moment, make sure to go to aura.com/redacted to try it for 2 weeks for free and see what it can do for you. Once again, you can visit our sponsor Aura to start your free trial right here, aura.com/redacted.
Well, a video has gone viral from Jose Vega. He confronted the editors of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and Reuters before being thrown to the ground by the dean of Columbia University, thrown to the floor for asking tough questions about the Nord Stream pipeline, Seymour Hersh, about journalism in general, and why these newspapers are refusing to cover one of the biggest stories of the last century. Watch this video.
One with Seymour Hersh because it's a policy and press hall event, so shouldn't we be talking about the Nord Stream since that's the biggest story of the century? And you guys, you have the executive editor of the New York Times there who came out with a phony story to try and block Seymour Hersh. It's just kind of funny how that happened, Did you even acknowledge Seymour Hersh? All of you are executive editors of papers that broke Pentagon, My Lai, Watergate. Is this the same papers or not? Is there anything you've gotten right in the last 20 years, or am I mistaken about that? It's just kind of funny because Iraq, wrong. Syria, wrong. Russiagate, really wrong. Okay, the list goes on and on. So the last thing you could do to try and actually fix your reputation is acknowledge that through leaks, we had to find out that Zelensky was going to bomb Moscow on the anniversary. If you're so impartial, shouldn't you at least say, right, that Zelensky was going to bring us on the verge of World War III? That seems pretty fair. While Julian Assange rots in prison, all of you got, fat checks because he's in jail for doing your job. And you know what? Tucker Carlson ain't no Seymour Hersh, but he did something you guys are scared to do. Speak the truth and actually be critical of the war, which is why he was actually fired from Fox, because you are all cowards, every single one of you. None of you have actually had any relevancy. And you know what? The mainstream press is now dying. Nobody's ever going to listen to you again. You have no credibility with the public. The only people who care about what you have to say are elite assholes who have nothing productive to say anymore, and it's dying off. So will you at least say something, either about Nord Stream or Ukraine or the fact that Zelensky brought us to the verge of World War III, and the only reason we knew about that was through leaks? Go ahead. It's a free speech event, right? You guys are the press. Let's say something here. Mr. Khan, come on. You're the executive editor of the New York Times, I'm just trying to get into some good trouble here, man. Woo, listen, Karen, get out of my face for a second. I got to talk to these gentlemen. Okay. Well, I just want to hear what they have to say. Go ahead. I'm done.
Wait your turn. Wait your turn.
You're not gonna tell them to you. Come.
Wait your turn.
You could project if we can't.
I just think it's important to hear everybody's point of view.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right.
I do think that we need to give our moderator a chance to ask other questions.
We're on the verge of World War III.
Some of the people in the audience also do so. Thank you. Really, thank you.
Say something about this bombing. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Listen, don't stand there while there are people rotting in prison. Nobody said anything about Uhuru, right? The socialists who are in jail for being critical of this war. God damn it. Let's go. At least say something about the people in jail for being critical of this war. They don't deserve to be in prison right now.
So, of course, it looks like these newspapers, these mainstream media publications, and corporate press are in bed with the deep state, the military-industrial complex. Dan Cohen is our Washington correspondent who's been diving deep into the research and how all of these organizations are actually intertwined into one big animal. And Dan, welcome to the show. Something stands out to me over the past 24 hours, which is Politico releasing an article saying that the high-ups inside the Pentagon are thrilled that Tucker Carlson is no longer an employee at Fox News because he would denigrate the military. This is just another example of this sort of deep state collusion with mainstream press.
Tucker was really the only figure in mainstream media to go against the grain and challenge the propaganda and psychological operations that we're all subjected to. I mean, I can't think of another person. There isn't another one. Now the entire mainstream media is just full of shills. And I think, that video of Jose Vega, that's exactly what he was trying to say, what he was trying to do, demanding that these editors talk about Seymour Hersh's reporting. So I want to say, first of all, hats off to Jose. For me, that was like a spiritual experience, watching him just refused to shut up and play nice. And I love when the New York Times editor tried to placate him and say like, well, we should listen to, all views. And he just kept going, and to the point where they actually had to drag him out. So, those Jose and a few others from the Schiller Institute who've been holding politicians and media figures accountable in public forums is fantastic. And I think we need a lot more people to do that. I want to highlight the role of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and also Foreign Policy magazine as fixtures of the permanent war state. So several of their national security correspondents are currently, or have been in the past, fellows at the Center for a New American Security. This is one of the premier Washington permanent war think tanks, founded in 2007 as the people were tiring of the Bush era and the Iraq war, and they sought to really bring together the two parties and do away with partisanship into the sort of permanent war uniparty, which already existed, but not in the same way. It's been much more effective. The Obama administration took a lot of staff from that think tank CNAS, and it's been very effective ever since then. So now we have several correspondents: David Sanger of the New York Times, we have Eric Schmidt, Greg Jaffe, Thomas Ricks. All of these guys have put out countless lies, from Iraq to Libya, Syria, Russiagate, all the Russiagate stories, Russian bounties, Russian troll farms. They are just liars who are in bed with CNAS, and CNAS is funded by government agencies, U.S. government agencies, primarily the Department of Defense, but also the State Department, with millions and millions of dollars. It's also funded by weapons manufacturers, oil corporations, George Soros's Open Society Foundation. But these reporters are supposed to be independent, but they're fellows at an organization funded by the U.S. government. What I don't know is, does that come with a stipend? Are they actually paid indirectly by the U.S. government? I reached out to CNAS. They didn't respond. I've asked them before. And so the other element is, you have the Biden administration is also heavily staffed by former CNAS figures. At least 16 members of the Biden administration worked at CNAS. Among them, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland, aka the Ukraine coup-monger. We have Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs Eli Ratner, Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation for the DoD Susanna Bloom, Assistant Secretary of Treasury for Terrorist Financing Elizabeth Rosenberg, Deputy CIA Director David Cohen. He was at CNAS, where these guys are fellows. You have White House National Security Council figure Peter Harrell, counselor to the U.S. State Department Derek Chollet, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Colin Kahl, National Security Council Coordinator Kurt Campbell, and DNI Director for National Intelligence Avril Haines. All of them, and those are just some of them, all of them were part of SLAMS. And presumably when the next administration comes, if it's not democratic, they'll just rotate out of government back into the think tanks. It's just, the constant kind of revolving doors inside this. So you have journalists in prominent organizations, prominent outlets, rubbing elbows at the same table as functionaries at the permanent war state.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and then you have, do they disclose this information anywhere? Like if you read a David Sanger piece, do you have an entire paragraph devoted to these conflicts of interest in every article that he writes?
I mean, you'd think, though, if they had any journalistic ethics, even a modicum of ethics, they would. But no, that's only visible on an obscure SLAMS website page on their site that I came across. So no, there's no transparency about that. That doesn't say in their articles, in their bio, in their interviews. When SLAMS does those war simulations, that you showed a couple days ago, that Redacted reported on earlier this week, that's not in there. That's not, ABC and NBC don't show that, this is actually funded by the U.S. government, by the military-industrial complex. They don't say any of that. These are just supposed to be independent thinkers. So
they give them full airtime. So Meet the Press, NBC does a whole segment on SLAMS, all of their strategic war games planning for war with China. ABC does on the floor of the House of Representatives, you have the anchor for ABC News standing there interviewing them, doing this war propaganda on television with no disclosure and no mention of these relationships.
Exactly. They did one with NBC with Chuck Todd last year in 2022, similarly, where they talked about war with Taiwan and, well, we don't want it, but we're just preparing for it anyway. So I mean, this think tank seen as in bed with the government, the military-industrial complex, the media, but we're supposed to believe that we have some beautiful democracy and that our media holds the government and power centers accountable. But China is the bad one because it has a one-party state. But the U.S. is a one-party state. It's just the permanent war party. And honestly, I think ours is even more it's cultish because you have to pretend that we're a shining city on the hill, a beacon of democracy for the world. Well, meanwhile, our government and the media and this whole beast is carrying out coups and wars around the world and destroying, life for working class people in this country, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, Victoria Nuland, who you mentioned is being, of course, responsible for the coup in Ukraine, of course, now just actively fomenting total destabilization of Sudan over the past week. So she's a busy woman, and it's amazing that these boards exist where these members, high-profile members of the media, are sitting on these boards, but no disclosure in their coverage to the American people in their news articles. I'm sure the New York Times, I'm sure the Washington Post will start to print that as part of every article that these guys write from now on, their conflicts of interest. Dan Cohen, thank you so much for joining us from Washington, diving deep into this beast, this deep state beast, as we keep our eye on it, because who else is going to cover it? And yes, applause to Jose Vega for standing up and asking those tough questions. We need more people like him to ask these tough questions. Dan, thanks so much.
Amen. Thanks a lot.
Merkman in our chat right now says, Jose gives me hope that someone is acting for us. Yes. So we raise a glass to you, Jose.
Oh, there's a bug in here.
Okay.
So Natali doesn't until.
So Natali does, but I will.
Okay. I'll drink out of this one.
Okay. Yeah, we've got more news to get to here on the show. Let us know your thoughts on that in the chat below. Right now, I don't know if you guys saw this there was some breaking news about a secret phone call that Jerome Powell had about the economy. Now, he had this with Vladimir Zelensky. It was a fake phone call. He wasn't actually on the phone. And so if you're paying attention to what's happening in the economy right now, you might be lied to by your leaders, but we are literally sitting on a recession. And so Jerome Powell was on this fake phone call, it was a prank phone call, and he admitted that we're heading for a recession. That's exactly what's happening. They're going to pull back on any more of this rate increases and allow this recession to sort of take hold. That's what's happening. That's what's happening to the U.S. dollar right now, and it's an absolute mess. So if you're paying attention, if you're plugged in, you really understand what's happening. We are sitting on a precipice of a disaster for the next year, year and a half as the government continues to print money. But our friends over at Lear Capital can actually help you get set up and start to buy gold and silver right now. If you call 1-800-613-3557 or go to learredacted.com. All you need to do is call that 800 number or go to learredacted.com. They'll help you get set up with a gold-based account. So you can transfer your old IRA or your old 401k over to a precious metals account so you can actually self-direct into precious metals, gold, silver. And right now, they're giving away $15,000 in bonus metals when you sign up and get a qualified account set up with them. Again, 1-800-613-3557 or go to learredacted.com. You know, precious metals have sustained their value for 4,000 to 5,000 years. Gold and silver have through times of famine and collapse of governments. And so, you know, again, this is Natali and I are big believers in making sure that you've got some kind of precious metals to protect your family against whatever these governments are going to be doing, continuing to devalue our currency. But I love that this fake phone call that Jerome Powell was on with a fake Vladimir Zelensky, he basically admits, yeah, we're in a recession. That's how things are going right now. Unbelievable. All right. Speaking of speaking of media being in bed with the government, yesterday President Biden held a press conference where he stumbled over sentences, talked about nuclear power with the president of South Korea. It was really embarrassing. But it's what Biden was holding in his hands, of course, that got the most attention. So while he was speaking, take a look at this. This is what he was holding in his hand, a couple of pages of cheat sheets there. And you'll notice what it says is Reporter Q&A. April 26, 2023, question number 1. And here's the reporter that's going to ask you that you need to call on her. Here's a photo of her so you can see her and call it out. You're going to call on this woman, Courtney, and then she's going to talk about foreign policy, and she's specifically going to ask you about semiconductor manufacturing. And how are you squaring your priorities around semiconductor manufacturing, but also hurting what South Korea is trying to do? So that's her question, basically, in a nutshell. So what does he do? First question, first reporter. Courtney, you in the audience. I just happened to pick on you randomly. Courtney, here you go.
First question from Courtney of the Los Angeles Times.
Oh, wow, how convenient.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your top economic priority has been to build up U.S. domestic manufacturing in competition with China. But your rules against expanding chip manufacturing in China is hurting South Korean companies that rely heavily on Beijing. Are you damaging a key ally in the competition with China to help your domestic politics ahead of the election? And one for President Yoon. There have been concerns since last year that North Korea will soon be conducting its 7th nuclear test amid growing domestic support in your country for your own nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Russia has suggested it could send its latest weapons to North Korea if South Korea sends lethal aid to Ukraine. How do you seek to manage the North Korea risk amid obligations to Ukraine and NATO? Thank you.
All right. So then that was the question. That was the question, right? So I'm looking at my cheat sheets. I mean, are we surprised by this?
No.
I mean, so this is how in bed the press is, the corporate press is with the White House, is with the federal government. Like, give us your pre-approved questions, and then we may call on you. And when we do, we need to know what your questions will be. No, you don't sit down with Tim Russert at Meet the Press and he gives you a list of questions ahead of time.
That's literally taught in journalism school 101.
You don't do that.
Is that you don't give your questions in advance. It could be like the dumbest, movie presser, and you should not do that. It's just sort of anti-journalistic.
So
it also makes me question like who wrote the questions and who gave them to who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, was it like totally, because here's the thing, like you're going to ask a question that's going to, if it's a tough question, you're not going to get picked on. They're going to go through the cards. Like, what's your question? Oh, here's your question. And by the way, if you get up there and then don't ask the question that you already pre-approved and gave to the White House press corps, you're never going to get a question to the president ever again. You'll be blackballed, right? Like that African reporter that keeps trying to get called on in the back room, and Jean-Pierre never calls on him. And he's like, look, it's been a year. I'm just asking a question about, something specific, and you won't answer it. So if you don't have these pre-approved questions, then you're not going to get called on. So here's how President Biden responded. Like, oh, I just so happened to have the answer ready to go on that very question.
My desire to increase U.S. manufacturing and jobs in America is not about China. I'm not concerned about China. Remember, America invented semiconductor. We invented it. We used to have 40% of the market. And we decided that what we're going to do over the past, I don't know how many decades, we decided that it was going to be cheaper to export jobs and import product.
So he has his prepackaged answer. He knows the questions. The press is complicit in all of this. And so listen to how CNN spun this, tries to spin this sort of collusion between the press and the White House, that it's Republicans who are seizing on this to play up his old age. This is how CNN reporter plays this up, that it's Republicans are seizing on this to play up the fact that he's demented. He's not mentally there. Really? Republicans are seizing on this? Watch this.
And Arlette, I mentioned President Biden in the Rose Garden yesterday during that press conference. There was also a moment in that press conference where a photographer captured the notes that President Biden was holding in his hand. And there appeared to be one with the reporter that he was going to call on, the first reporter he called on during that press conference. And now there are allegations about whether or not he had the question in advance. What is the White House saying about what happened here?
Well, Caitlin, it's not uncommon for the White House to prepare these types of briefing materials for the president, but it's the level of specificity that is in the spotlight in this moment. As you noted, that note card included the name and photo of a reporter and also a possible question. Now, it's worth noting that her question was not identical to what was on that note card, and her outlet says that they did not submit any questions to the White House ahead of this press conference. But we have seen the president in the past carrying around these note cards with details about the events, where he needs to go, the people that he's meeting with. Now, these types of moments are things that Republicans have seized on, especially as they have tried to highlight President Biden's age. Yesterday, President Biden said that he took a hard look at his own age when deciding to run in 2024. He ultimately decided to move forward with that reelection, and he has said it will be up to the voters to decide whether he deserves a second term.
So it's Republicans' fault.
But then was it their fault for taking the piss out of President Trump and asking if he needed mental evaluations or physical evaluations, or whether or not the evaluations he got from his doctor were legit or doctored?
Well, I mean, this is what CNN did. CNN did a whole multiple segments on this about the cognitive ability of President Trump to run again and the physical.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Philip.
You can't have it both ways.
I think they also tipped their hand as to which direction of flow that the question came from, because they said our producers did not provide them with any questions. What they didn't say was they didn't provide us with the question, and that's why she didn't get it exact, was because it was given to us, not the other way around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good point. So we're not surprised about this, but I love the spin from CNN. They're all complicit in this as well. So they get called on. Those few reporters in that press room get called on because they play the game. They're not asking tough questions like what we just saw in that Jose Vega segment. Can you imagine like actually asking tough questions of the president? To be fair, there was one tough question that did come out of that press conference, which had to do about how basically no one wants you to run for president, No one wants you to run for president, Mr. President. Why are you running for president, Mr. President? To which he's like, I'm good. I'm gonna run. I'm good because people want it. It's like, no, you just don't understand the question. The polling shows that no one wants you to run for president. Like, why? Anyway.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, yes, they do.
what I
I
have
see
to
my
say.
own polling. I looked in the mirror and I saw my own poll, and I know what I'm good at. I'm good at that.
It really, even that level of performance seems agony for him to muster up.
It's crazy.
And you know that this is the best he's got. You know, he's really putting his best foot forward, and it is shaky.
But the former Trump physician says he absolutely should be taking a cognitive test. Like if he's going to run, we should have it was the same stuff that they were asking of President Trump. Take an IQ test, a cognitive test. Take a cognitive test and let us know like how you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, let us know. I saw some people asking about our store. Yes, if you wanted to get some mugs, you can go to the redactedstore.com, redactedstore.com. I got our new hats and other things like that over there as well. So redactedstore.com is where you can go. There you go. Klaus Schwab does not shop at our store. Redacted.
I just wanted to let everybody know that he might. We don't know. He might.
Maybe. What if Klaus Schwab was secretly a fan of Redacted? He's like, all of this stuff, all of this World Economic Forum stuff is a total scam. It's a total front. What I really love, my favorite show is Redacted. I would love that.
I like seeing how far they get down my global agenda.
That's right.
All right. Let's talk about, this is my second story of the night about people who prey on children. And I had a rough afternoon after going through all of this because my first story was about child sexual predators, and then this one now about child traffickers. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. It's one of those things, one of those days where I'm like, I want off this planet. Just stop it, and I'm done. And I'm
you want to join
right
Jerry
now,
Springer?
Why did he go off planet?
He died today.
Kind of.
Yeah. Oh, he did go off planet. Okay. I didn't know that.
No more Jerry Springer segments about men marrying horses.
Okay. Yeah. Or like beating up your relatives.
Back in the time when Jerry Springer was doing segments like that, that was outrageous. Like,
yes.
Really? This guy's marrying a horse? And then now in 2023, Jerry Springer's like, I'm dying because now all this stuff is actually happening.
Right. And we're asking for rights for the person.
Yeah. The guy that wants to marry a horse. There's going to be some legislature, probably Minnesota legislature is going to pass that it's okay for a guy to marry a horse.
Absolutely. That is a thing. I read it in the New York Times Magazine not too long ago, and that also was disturbing. I just want to tell you, I'm not going to reincarnate as a human again. This is my last time, you guys. I'm not coming back the way this world's going.
Come back as a turtle.
Or something. Okay. That's been said. Okay, here's the question. Is the U.S. government a child trafficker middleman? This would make them a pimp. You may recall that we had the discussion recently about whether or not the word pimp is allowed. Is that a woke word, or has it been replaced by something that makes it sound fun and good and acceptable? I'm going to use the word pimp until someone tells me not to. That is what one government whistleblower says. Tara Lee Rodas, a Health and Human Service whistleblower, gave her opinion statement on the child migrant crisis to the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday. It is horrific. We are going to play you the video, and she doesn't get too graphic, so we feel comfortable letting you see it, and also just bringing this to your attention. This is from a hearing in the Senate called The Biden Border Crisis, Exploitation of Unaccompanied Alien Children. We're still using alien, so I guess I can still use pimp. The purpose was to examine the surge of unaccompanied children, and we call this UAC. So if I say that again, you know what I mean. Now, according to the Customs and Border Protection statistics, the number of UACs who arrive at the border has swelled from 33,000 in 2020 to more than 146,000 in fiscal year 2021. And 152,000 in 2022.
Jeez.
So, I mean, that is a big jump in numbers. So far in fiscal year 2023, we have seen more than 70,000, and we're not even halfway through the year. Here are some statistics from the last 10 years to just show where they're coming from. Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, and then others. So most of them from Central and South America.
And by the way, most of them countries that we, the United States, have destabilized.
Yes. Now, this is an incomplete chart because it stops in 2017, but just look how it kind of steadily continues to rise. And then look at the increase in this chart from just unaccompanied minors alone since 2020. There seemed to be a bit of a dip right after the pandemic. That's probably because no one was counting, or we didn't know what the heck. People were staying home. And then just through the roof. Again, according to Customs and Border Protection statistics, the number that arrived just keeps going. And now the Biden administration is being accused of not even knowing where 85,000 children are right now. They just don't know. So let's let this whistleblower, she was a volunteer. She just thought, hey, you know, I see on the news there's this migrant crisis. I'm going to help come and process these children. She had this beautiful dream that she'd be taking these beautiful children and matching them with families who wanted children. That's not how it worked out for her. We're going to let it play. She has 5 minutes, so you know that's how long it takes, but we may interrupt a time or two. So buckle up, because this is a sad story.
Today, children will work overnight shifts at slaughterhouses, factories, restaurants to pay their debts to smugglers and traffickers. Today, children will be sold for sex. Today, children will call a hotline to report they are being abused, neglected, and trafficked, and we don't know if they're going to get the help they need. For nearly a decade, unaccompanied children have been suffering in the shadows, and I have to confess, I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021, when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with the crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children. As for me, my interest is the safety of the children. I do not view this as a political issue. I view this as a humanitarian issue. I assure you, my motives are the highest and best. I want the children protected. So I want to tell you some of what I witnessed personally at the Pomona Fairplex. I saw vulnerable indigenous children from Guatemala who speak Mayan dialects and cannot speak Spanish. That means they cannot ask for help in English. They cannot ask for help in Spanish. They become captives of their sponsors. I have sat with case managers as they've cried to tell me the horror of what has happened to children as they make the journey to this country. I saw apartment buildings where 20, 30, and 40 unaccompanied minors have been released. I saw sponsors trying to simultaneously sponsor children from multiple ORR sites at one time. I saw sponsors using multiple addresses to obtain sponsorships of children. And I saw numerous cases of children in debt bondage, and the child knew they had to stay with the sponsor until the debt was paid. Realizing that we were not offering the children the American dream, but instead putting them in modern-day slavery with wicked overlords, was a terrible revelation. A terrible revelation. These children are a captive victim population with no access to law enforcement or knowledge of their rights. They are extorted, abused, neglected, and that is why I blew the whistle in 2021. I witnessed firsthand the horrors of child trafficking and exploitation. My life will never be the same after what I saw. But
All right, so she now goes on to say that she has hope, and she thinks that There can be certain policy changes, such as don't move so fast when a child comes in, and like just try and process them out, kind of like a, UPS package. She talks about transparency. She talks about, vetting sponsors better, because she says here that some children come in and sponsors are applying at various services to get children, almost like you go to the pound and you're like, I'll get some from that one, I'll get some from that one, I'll get some from that one, like commodities. Now, about this 85,000 missing children number, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra said that he doesn't know anything about these 85,000 children. He basically shrugged it off when he was asked about it recently. Watch.
I'd like to know what you're doing to find the children and what you're doing to make certain that these children are not being trafficked.
Senator, first, those statistics that you've mentioned, as I said previously, in regards to another question by one of your colleagues, those are unfamiliar to me. I have no idea where those statistics come from, if they're based in reality or not. And we do everything we can to make sure any child, before we allow them to be released to a sponsor, that sponsor has been vetted.
Okay.
The vast majority of these children end up with a family member, immediate family member, as a placement. So some of those statistics that are being thrown out there that don't seem to be based in fact really would go contrary to what actually we've done.
It's a total lie.
Yeah. According to what the whistleblower says, yes, it is.
And also, I mean, they're not being placed with relatives. So they don't know who often they're just dropped there. They don't have any connection.
Right.
They don't have a family member. They don't know.
And like she says, it's not like they're speaking English or Spanish. They're speaking a Mayan dialect, and nobody speaks it to know, like, where'd you come from? Where are your parents? Who can we contact? So they can't even ask for help or say who their families are, if they have any in the United States. So, yes, I mean, it does seem like the crisis was a lot more fun to talk about when we could blame it on President Trump. That's how the media feels, at least. But now that the Biden administration is responsible, it has become worse. Now, there are a few like lingering questions I still have about this testimony. And she says child trafficking has exploded. Obviously, it's really hard to get statistics about that, because if you're trafficking a child, you don't report it. You don't tell them where you're taking the child. These children can just disappear. They poof off of the grid. And then the piece, she said that the United States is responsible for recruitment in home country. So what does that mean? Like, what is the U.S. government's role in recruiting from these home countries? Well, we showed you the main countries, which were Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico. I have major questions that I was not, today at least, able to find those answers. So I welcome your tips and clues, and if I can, follow a thread. But now it seems like this is getting big enough that even the New York Times is not able to ignore it as a fun thing to throw at Trump. They are saying that as migrant children were put to work, the U.S. ignored warnings. So there are clear signs that more than just this whistleblower knows this. More people know this. It's not something that, Secretary Becerra can just sort of say. Like he literally shrugged like 8 times. Like, I don't know. It's that, sometimes you lose some paperwork.
I haven't seen those numbers. Yeah.
So this is a lot more serious than all of that. And this is just, for us, it's something that opens more questions than answers, but it deserves our attention. So let us know what you think of this story in the chat below.
We're going to talk about the World Economic Forum in the moment, and how do they manage to infiltrate so many governments? Well, we have an idea now how Klaus Schwab's army, World Economic Forum individuals, have managed to make it into all sorts of different governments and cabinets across the world, and have been not just getting there, but also actively implementing huge pieces of their policies and the World Economic Forum's policies. So we'll talk about that in a second. And also, please subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe, your name will pop up here on the big screen. We really appreciate it. Our statistics show that a lot of you watch the show, but you're not subscribed. Maybe you find it difficult, or it's hard to find the subscribe button or something. If you're watching us on a TV, maybe it's hard to find it or whatever. But please do subscribe. It really helps us here and to get the message out for independent journalism and to be able to continue to cover the stories that we do here on the show.
All right, but first we'd like to tell you about one of our show sponsors, Phoenix Capital. With banks collapsing and the turbulent state of the stock market, millions of Americans have watched their retirement savings disappear. I want to share with you a unique investment opportunity that is not only protecting retirement savings, but investors are seeing consistent yield and growth. Phoenix Capital Group is offering high-value U.S. oil and gas investments through their corporate bonds. It's a way for people to invest in energy assets and diversify their portfolio, with yield ranging from 8 to 12% APR paid monthly with different qualifications and maturity dates. Phoenix Capital Group is a tech-led energy company owning in some of the most lucrative basins across America. Investor capital, along with their own capital, goes towards positive cash flow oil and gas projects. They had the choice of offering a significantly lower interest rate and paying the difference to middlemen, but decided to break the mold and bring stronger investments directly to investors. These 8 to 12% APY corporate bonds are higher than CDs or annuities, often more than double the typical yields. So if you're looking for an alternative investment with sizable yields and monthly payments, we recommend that you check out Phoenix Capital Group's bond offerings. So you can learn more by downloading their free investor guide today at phxonredacted.com. That's phxonredacted.com. So it's like PHX on redacted.com, and let them know that you heard it from us.
All right, well, here is a question for you. Why has the World Economic Forum been so amazingly successful? The World Economic Forum, founded by Klaus Schwab, is not just a benign organization that pushes agenda items like transhumanism, 15-minute cities, the end of combustion engines, climate lockdowns, digital currency, the elimination of cash, the elimination of sovereign governments. This is basically what they want, right? It would be one thing if all of these items were just pie in the sky ideas, but it's quite another thing how all of these things are actually coming to pass. Many governments have been implementing many of their policies, not just in the United States, but in France and New Zealand and Canada and Australia, Ireland, the Netherlands. The list is actually frighteningly long. How does this happen? How did they get so strong? Well, it turns out that the World Economic Forum has a very good farm system. You know, it's like Major League Baseball and the minor league baseball teams. Like they farm it out and they start them young. A grooming program, if you will, called the Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum. Now, we've covered this a bit on the show, but I want to do more of a deep dive now, because what they do is they seek you out. They groom you. They place you into this program. There's just one caveat. You need to be young. You need to be 40 or under so that you can then infiltrate these governments and do the bidding of the World Economic Forum.
It's like a kids club.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like, okay, you know, we're getting you started young. We're getting you started so you can be indoctrinated and then rise up inside of this organization. Now, the expose did a great job cataloging just a few of these World Economic Forum young leaders who ended up infiltrating these governments and then running the show, basically. And they explain, quote, the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program, founded in 2004, is designed to cultivate a network of exceptional individuals under the age of 40 from various fields, including business, politics, academia. Schwab has openly admitted that these young global leaders are infiltrating governments around the world. And he gloats about it, by the way. So let's just start with Justin Trudeau as an example here, the Prime Minister of Canada, dictator Justin Trudeau. Trudeau has implemented dystopian policies that align with, of course, a lot of what the World Economic Forum wants and their globalist vision for the world. Here are just a few examples. Carbon pricing and climate change policies, according to the expose. Trudeau's government has implemented a carbon pricing system, which is exactly what the WEF wants, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, aligning with the World Economic Forum's focus on sustainability, environmental responsibility. Also, internet regulation. We've been covering the internet regulation here on the show from Trudeau for many, many months now. Of course, in the wake of the trucker convoy and all of the clampdowns on free speech and misinformation and disinformation that he loves to talk about, right? They've absolutely pushed for measures that could infringe on freedom of speech in that country. That's exactly what the World Economic Forum wants. pandemic response, right? The COVID-19 response. Trudeau's government has implemented all sorts of measures to control the spread of COVID-19, pushing lockdowns, of course, travel restrictions, and vaccine mandates. Although last week he tried to rewrite history and pretend that he didn't push people to get vaccines at all, which was laughable. And then he acknowledged that there's problems with the vaccines. He started saying that for the first time, like he's trying to rewrite history. All of these measures that we talked about, and there's more, of course, his clampdowns on the media, picking and choosing what media gets to have an audience with the government of that country, or registering to be a media organization, a news organization, only if you ask favorable questions or you are ideologically aligned with the Trudeau government. Here is
transhumanism by way of, human-assisted suicide for just people who are depressed.
Yeah, and leading the push on that, right? Like talk about the transhumanism, like you feel depressed? Well, why not take some pills to end your life early?
Yeah.
Yeah, forgot about that one. Let's add that to the list. Here's Klaus Schwab praising Trudeau, one of his young proteges.
But what we are very proud of now, the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
Isn't that sick and disgusting? That's frightening. Like I went to a meeting, I went to a reception for Justin Trudeau yesterday, and I was looking around, and more than half of his cabinet members are all members of the World Economic Forum, Young Global Leaders group. Like we've penetrated, infiltrated these cabinets. And that's just one. That's just one example in Canada. A member of the Young Global Leader class of 2020, very, very young, Sanna Marin, who became the world's youngest serving prime minister when she took office in 2019 in Finland. She's been a vocal advocate of all sorts of crazy progressive policies, obviously climate change mitigation, but all sorts of gender equality issues. I'm trying to think what else in Finland she's been responsible for that is incredibly troubling.
I'm going to use this term that people go crazy for when I say she's a COVID media darling.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she loved COVIDism. Mm-hmm. So yes, absolutely. So Sanna Marin, also member of the Young Global Leaders. So she rose to the level of prime minister. See how this happens?
She also was voted out.
Yeah.
As prime minister recently.
So, but the thing is, when they get voted out, then they become in some ways more powerful because now they're being used for other purposes. Just like Jacinda Ardern, who was voted out, or not voted out, decided to leave early under mysterious circumstances in New Zealand. Why was she sort of pushed out? Because now she's being used for other purposes. Ardern is a member of the Young Global Leaders portion of the World Economic Forum of 2014, class of 2014. She's, of course, she's been heavily criticized for all of the excess deaths. Over 3,000% increase in excess deaths due to mandatory COVID-19 vaccination laws in New Zealand that Jacinda Ardern enforced at the behest of the World Economic Forum. She's no longer prime minister, but now, of course, she's being used by the World Economic Forum to fly around the world to promote all sorts of things about extreme government policies, media control, censorship, misinformation, disinformation. That's her new modus operandi on taxpayer dollars, by the way, for the World Economic Forum. So even though she's not prime minister anymore, who cares? There's other members of the global young elite that are part of the World Economic Forum that are part of this parliamentary office anyway. It doesn't matter about her. She's doing the bidding in other ways now. And perhaps worst of all is Emmanuel Macron. Of course, there he is, standing next to his buddy, Klaus Schwab. He was a member of the Young Global Leadership class of 2016 before being elected to office. And Macron has implemented several policies, many. So his list is long. He's probably got the longest. He even beats Trudeau in my mind for frighteningly scary World Economic Forum leader. Surveillance, security measures. Think about what he did during for COVID passports, right? And passport restrictions and monitoring all of that COVID-19 response, potential erosion of freedoms with all sorts of measures to allegedly curb and spread the virus, seriously impeded human rights, eroded individual freedoms. Introduction of the health passports, the vaccine passports, proof of vaccination, or required a negative test to go into certain public spaces, like even to just go into public spaces, personal liberties infringements, of course, exactly what the World Economic Forum wants. Digital transformation and privacy concerns. He promoted digital transformation within France and the European Union, according to the expose. For example, facial recognition technology in public spaces for just being in a public space, like I'm being analyzed and put into a database. Labor reforms, all sorts of increasing to reduce unemployment through labor reforms that they're going to undermine workers' rights and, of course, protections for workers. So job insecurity, income inequality, a lot of different things that he's put in place over the years. So Emmanuel Macron on that list. Anything else you can think of from Emmanuel Macron?
Removal of cheap energy, environmentalism. He's one of those.
Absolutely, yeah.
From what I saw some videos that he's apparently incredibly popular in France for the retirement age, just sort of ramming that through without any votes. Yeah, the change in retirement age.
Yeah,
I saw it look like people were really happy.
Yeah, they're really cheering. They were in the streets really cheering and applauding that in France.
Yeah.
I saw him lighting some fires so that they were sure that he would know that they support him by shining a light on all of Paris.
Yeah.
I would love to know how many people in the Biden administration, obviously Biden is not a member of the Young Global Leaders. He
aged out.
He aged out of that. He's probably a member of the Seniors Club of World Economic Forum. But I don't know if they have that or not. He gets a discount at 5:00 for the early bird special. But I wonder how many people inside of Biden's cabinet are actually members of the World Economic Forum Young Global Leadership Council. It'd be fascinating to see.
Yeah.
Because, hey, Biden gets pushed out. Doesn't matter because there's always there's other guys right there ready to go and sign in. By the way, I should point out Putin was also a member of the Young Global Leaders group back in the day.
Oh. Has he gone rogue then?
I guess he's probably like completely been like, boy, I should not have. I think, and that was one of the things that Putin talked about was like trying to come to the table to have dialogue with these other countries. I mean, he's talked repeatedly over the years about trying to join NATO and having a dialogue where we could come together. But he was always rebuked. He was always said, no, you can't. We need to have an enemy. The United States needs an enemy in somebody like Putin. And now, of course, it's China as well. So interesting. He must have, I wonder if he's in alignment on any of these issues, any of these major issues, because in all of his speeches, at least over the past year, all of his speeches totally crap on exactly what's being talked about here at the World Economic Forum. And his energy policies totally crap on everything that the World Economic Forum is doing.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know what the life was like of someone living during COVID restrictions in Russia, how much the vaccines were rolled out. That's one thing, but we do know that, the labor market reforms, the environmentalism, the censorship. Again, we'll leave that one aside. They're just things we still don't know. But these guys are like stamp out, carbon cutouts, the ones we just gone over.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to wonder if there's like they let in some of these bigger world leaders just to like have them have a seat at the table, or they to try to offer some sort of legitimacy. Last year, someone pointed out in the chat he was banned from coming to Davos. So Putin was banned from coming to Davos last year, of course. So
yeah,
I don't know. He's been excommunicated, I guess, from the Klaus Schwab Club.
And now there is
if you're
go ahead.
I was gonna say, if your country doesn't start with a G, like the G7, the G20, like that, you're not invited. It just you have to have that G in there. So.
And now there is talk about whether or not South Africa will remove itself from certain Western organizations because there is this international warrant for arrest for Putin, and there will be a BRICS conference in South Africa later on this year. In which case it would obligate South Africa to detain President Putin. And South Africa says, we're not removing memberships from any groups, but we're not exactly going to do that either. So will he even come, or will he send somebody else? Who knows at this point what will happen.
Well, let us know your thoughts on that story in the comments below. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all of our new VIP members who became channel members and supporters of our show. If you go to redacted.inc, the website, you can sign up on the newsletter on the left-hand side of your screen, right? But on the right-hand side of your screen, if you click that, you can become a Redacted Rebel VIP. And for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism. And if you're on Rumble, you can just click the big join red button right there and join us on Locals. And again, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism if you desire. Again, this is a totally free show, but if you want to support us and support our team, support the journalism that we do here and the coverage that we have, you can definitely do that, and it helps us keep the lights on. Helps us pay for the cameras and the bandwidth and our team and all of that, so that we can do this show Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time for you and have coverage throughout the weekend as well. So again, redacted.inc, you can become a Redacted Rebel VIP and your name will pop right up. Oh, someone just became one. So someone just became a member. So if you do, your name will pop up here on the big screen. So that's going to do it for our show on this Thursday.
Thank you for joining us. We just said we broadcast Monday through Thursday. Today's Thursday, so that does it for us from the week. But we will have content over the weekend, so please stay tuned to the channel and join us again live on Monday. It'll be May 1st.
Yeah.
So we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.